I'm alive. Good afternoon. Welcome to Performance Scrutiny Committee Placing Corporate. Just so we can open up the meeting, just to advise, we currently don't have a chair for today's meeting. So would the committee like to vote in and to nominate a chair for today's meeting, please?
I think John Richards. Can I nominate John Richards, please?
Okay, are the committee happy with Councillor Richards to chair for today's meeting?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Over to you. Thanks, Councillor Richards.
Thank you. Could you do me a favour, Neil? Could you just read out the statement that needs to be read at the start of these meetings, please? I had a problem getting in. I don't want to do an email swap with you in case I get kicked out.
Yeah, sure, Chair. Won't be a moment. Okay, this scrutiny committee is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and the remote meetings protocol agreed by the council, which will operate alongside the council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to make democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise and to help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast? The council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as an ordinary meeting, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me and to the chair when they would wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until the chair invites you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. And for the benefit for everyone watching on the live stream, when the chair invites members to cast, so there's no voting on this. Okay, as well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the council website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you, and welcome to everyone who's in attendance. First item on the agenda is apologies, please. Are there any apologies, Neil?
Councillors Linton and Barry, Chair.
Thank you. Any more? No, that's it. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any, please? No. And the third item on your agenda, the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of November 2021 on pages 3 to 13. First of all, could somebody propose they were a correct record, and if there were any matters arising from those minutes?
I propose they're a true record.
Someone second that? Councillor Nuami, you were present. Could you second? Oh.
Yeah, second, Chair. No problem.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any matters arising from that meeting, please?
We were promised some updates about the tree planting, and I don't think we've received that information yet.
Tree planting. Neil, any comment on that, please?
I could chase that up with Joe Gossage, Chair. That's been noted. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Apologies. We have issued that, but I think it is stuck with Joe. So I'll work with Neil to chase that down for you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, item 4, is the budget and medium-term financial forecast, and it's pages 13 to 76 of your agenda. Okay, is it Miriam?
Hi, Chair. Yes, I'm here. So, what I propose that might be useful is that if I give a brief overview as to the process that we've followed this year that has led to the detail that is in the agenda pack here, and then via yourself open it up to the committee to ask colleagues any particular detailed questions about individual issues, if that's okay. So it's been a different budget process this year. I mean, obviously, we're now in the second year of working through the pandemic and all of the issues that brings with us. We had a relatively generous settlement in this current financial year. We followed a more optimistic budget process this year. So you'll recognise in the past where we've had to take some pretty prudent and, as has been shown, overly prudent approach to our RSG funding increases in previous years, and inevitably, when you then add on the council budget pressures to that leads you to identifying a need to find some significant savings, and we come to this point with a list of budget savings. We have had late settlements in the past, and therefore we've had to do that before we actually knew what the actual settlement was, and that's been that's not been the optimum process. Now this year we've taken a more bullish approach to what the RSG increase might be. We worked through the medium-term financial plan over the summer and early autumn across all services. Heads of service had meetings with the chief executive and myself, and we worked through and updated the existing medium-term financial plan. And it looked to us still in the autumn that the noises coming out of Cardiff and where that medium-term financial plan was that it was reasonably prudent to still assume that actually we probably wouldn't need to identify any early savings through the budget process. So that is the kind of the work that we did pre-settlement, worked through the MTFP and took a pretty optimistic approach to our funding scenarios. So we get to December. There was a late settlement again this year. That was on the 21st of December, literally a few days before Christmas, and actually the settlement was quite generous, as the report highlights. We've now received a 3-year settlement, which is a very positive thing. We've been asking for that for a long time. It was preloaded effectively, so a big increase for Newport of just over 10% next year, £24 million plus, reduced to 3.5 and then 2.4% increases average across Wales in the following two years, alongside a small increase in our tax base. Total funding next year is due to increase by a little bit over £27 million. So that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. However, the minister highlighted a number of areas where she expected local governments to sort of deal with this settlement, and actually they do amount to considerable budget pressures against that increased income. So things like paying our care providers an amount so that they can pay their staff the real living wage as opposed to the minimum wage. That's a significant budget pressure there. We've had to increase our estimates for our pay increases up to 4%, as the report highlights. National insurance, of course, is going up for all employers April onwards, what was 1.25% increase. That's a significant cost pressure against the council's budget. And we've got some pension scheme increases next year as well. And those things are on top of, you know, the usual demand issues in social care and our new and growing schools and school population, which we've had to factor in as well. Just pay and inflation next year is 6.66 million. So we had a very small window to prepare the draft budgets for consultation. 3 themes are highlighted: schools, city centre, and prevention and sort of early interaction with kind of issues. Those are the 3 areas. Some of the budget investments linked to those are highlighted in this report. Some of the larger figures are within within the social care and sort of schools area. They'll be subject to tomorrow's scrutiny, not this one. But clearly, when the budget is finalised for the February cabinet, there'll be further investments highlighted in across those 3 areas there. So the committee is really faced with a very different scenario, Chair. Today, you're not actually reviewing budget savings. There are no new budget savings. What there are is a 3 kind of main thrust, 3 main priority areas for investments. Some of the investments in those areas are within this draft budget already, and then the balance will have to be done for the final budget. And a council tax increase, a draft council tax increase for consultation of 3.7%, which for your typical band A to sort of band C in sort of Newport is an annual increase of just under £31 up to just under £41. So, Chair, this is part of the budget consultation exercise. The minutes from this meeting and yourself as Chair will go to your management committee meeting, and there'll be a collation of scrutiny responses put forward at that point to go to the cabinet meeting on the 18th of February. But as I've said, your discussion point is really around those priority areas, the budget investments. Fees and charges are included in your papers as well in this area. And we go from there, Chair. Thank you. You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you very much, and for the detailed report. I open it to committee now. Any comments?
Can I start? Sorry.
I was just saying, colleagues are here from the service areas to deal with specific individual items. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Right, Micdad, you go first, sir.
Yeah. Can I just say, oh, what a change, hey? You know, I think, I don't know, I can't remember the last time I've been in a meeting. It was probably pre-scrutiny times when we actually were not under such a stress to argue for why you should not cut this or cut that aspect of the service, or try and, you know, understand why people don't want you to raise the cost of this and that part of the service and so on and so forth. So it's a breath of fresh air. I don't know what brought it about. Obviously, the pandemic has something to do with it, but you know, it's great to see for the first time we can actually talk about additions, you know, to vital areas really of our sort of public services, rather than cutbacks. So, you know, I'm not gonna be hasty and say that is the end of austerity.
No.
Yeah. I think that will always be there, probably in the background, as long as we have a government in London that, you know, still believe in that. But anyway, for this year, this is great. I looked at the national context, Myron, and, you know, I felt, well, there was a comment here about the, it says really that pre-Senate elections, that actually the outlook was bleak. But then when the sort of the departmental figures were announced and all that, that actually the Welsh, it has transformed the outlook for the Welsh budget. I think that's what you say on page 28. One item that attracted me there, amongst all the other ones that you've spoken about, was the accelerated funding for the Cardiff City region deal to foster track support, including for advanced manufacturing capability in the region. Can you elaborate on that for us, please, Myron?
A little bit, as much as I'm able to, Councillor. So we're all obviously aware of the Cardiff City region. We contribute just under 10% of its cost, alongside all the other councils and also Treasury. This city growth deal is a very ambitious one relative to the others in Wales, for sure. And it is quite ambitious to both invest and to leverage in further in investments into economic growth into its area. So the business plan that the cabinet, which is made up of all the leaders of the councils, agreed, accelerated their investments. And that meant that all of the councils obviously had to increase their contributions in order to fund that investment, because Treasury also invest, but we were going to invest quicker than the Treasury money was coming in, which meant that there was a short-term kind of cash flow that we were funding until the Treasury money then came in and kind of replaced it. So the total that they were spending was exactly the same. It was just forward. It was just bought forward ahead of Treasury funding, and that was because of the scale of its ambition. So that is where we were as part of the settlement for Wales. There was increased funding for the city region deal as well. So some of that accelerated funding, that accelerated spending can now be partly funded by its improved funding and quicker funding from the Treasury as well. So its plans are still unchanged in terms of its ambition to accelerate spend. Obviously, actually spending and investing monies is, more problematic today than was envisaged, given the ongoing pandemic. But that is the ambition. So we will have to contribute our share of any additional costs or cash flow costs that ambition brings about.
And the reference to the advanced manufacturing capability of the region, is that specifically the semiconductor foundry, or is it, more of a manufacturing capability, which I think we would really welcome? Manufacturing is always an important sector, isn't it? But do they mean that or the other?
I think it is about over and beyond the semiconductor facility. That's already happened. This is further ambition in that area. I don't know if Tracy Brooks is here and has any more detail. I don't have any specific detail about the actual detailed projects that makes up that kind of general heading, as it were. I don't know if any other colleagues are here that's got any more details or not.
Hi, Tracy.
Hello, Tracy.
Hi, Chair. I'll just come in there. I don't have a list of projects that they were looking to invest in for the advanced manufacturing, but certainly, it's one of these sort of ambitions and one of the drivers for just general growth in the region. I think that, alongside some of the established businesses that we've got in Newport and in the rest of the region, it is very much a target market for us to be investing in and creating jobs and economic growth. So I can perhaps come back with a list of sort of projects that have come forward, but certainly it's more an aspirational investment growth plan rather than an endless list of specific investments.
Yeah, thanks for that. Can I just say, I mean, it's, I picked that point because I think it's really very important for, as part of the economic growth strategy, really. But it's kind of, we don't really know much about it. As members, we don't know much about it. I mean, I'm sure I speak probably for many of my colleagues on that. And we are putting money into it, as you correctly said, Myron, as part of the Capital City Region scheme for funding. But, as a member, and I hope other colleagues will share with me, we need to know a little bit more about this. So we would welcome a note, really, about these things, or perhaps even a briefing, in the way we do it, like when we have all member seminars or something. But I would appreciate a note on this because it's not kind of transparent to me as a member as where the trade-off is and what we're going to get in return. I know the leader has in the past referred me to the minutes of the Cardiff City region, but I want to be able to know it, like I know about other involvement we have, like I know about the city centre and what we are doing there, so I can actually say to my constituent, well, this is what is that, So I would request that, Chairman.
Okay, I think we've noted what you said. You're looking for a note or a briefing, looking for an update really on capital city regions, and fine, I think that's been noted.
Thank you.
That's fine, Chair. Yeah.
Right. Any other committee member, please? Have we finished? Sorry, Mick-Dad, have you got anything else? Mick-Dad, back to you. Is there anything else? You usually got a list.
Goodness me. Right. In terms of the charges, the increase on, so again, I welcome a lot of them have actually are staying the same, and I think that's a point we need to make here as well. So I welcome that very much, but there are some that we have actually proposing some increases. One concerns my residents a lot, and that is the resident parking permits. I notice it is, a modest increase. Can I just ask, when did we last raise it to £34 from what it was £30? Just so that I can appreciate the extra pound now that we're proposing is happening. I mean, I'm really looking so that we don't increase it every year from now on. But can I just ask that question? When did we raise it to 34 from the original 30 when we started only a few years ago?
Shall I come in, Chair?
By all means.
Yeah, so yes, so it did go up last year. This is one of the fees that's broadly going up by the 4% mark. So a lot of the fees either default at 0 or at 4%. So really fees that are supplies and services and staff are broadly this year still going up by 4%, obviously to meet that element of the inflation in terms of our costs. So yeah, so most of those fees will be in and around the 4%. Sometimes they're not exactly because they round off to sort of round figures.
So when was the last increase, Paul, please?
Sure. So these ones went up last year, so they go up roughly by the inflation amount each year. So it's usually 4% or there or thereabouts.
So we can expect that to happen every year, do we?
So obviously each year they come to scrutiny for you to decide and for you to raise your concerns. But on our default assumption, which I think is still in the MTFP plan for future years, is that for these sort of fees that we average around about 4%. That's right, Myrian?
Yes, it is. So I mean, this has caused a bit of confusion across the place. There is a general overall assumption that in the medium-term financial plan that all of our significant fees and charges that we control go up by 4% each year. Now that's a financial planning assumption, which does mean that you know, if you can't make that 4% due to volumes or you can cut costs, etc., then yes, as Paul says, services do need to consider raising their fees and charges by that amount. Obviously, also other things come into consideration as well. So for residents parking, it's really important that there is a fee increase to cover the cost increase. So otherwise you're going to get the general taxpayer subsidizing a service which is only available for a small area or for a small number of taxpayers locally. So it's important that that subsidy doesn't actually increase, or there isn't a subsidy, so therefore it does need to increase at least by what the cost base of running that service is as well. So that's also a consideration as well. But there's a general financial planning assumption of 4% that is also you know, included in our plans as well. So a number of issues come into being when these fees and charges are finalised.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? I think this particular one, we've always sort of considered resident parking, and it's not just the one ward, several wards now actually partake in it. Not one that we have increased every year with inflation. We have made increases. I think before it went to £30, it was actually 17. And it went from 17 to 30 when we introduced CPE. And I think at the time we sold it to our resident as being, okay, it is a big increase, but you're getting now CPE with it, which means that it will be police now far more effectively than what the police were doing. And they accepted that. I think it would be a problem if it's increased every year. I really do, you know, and I think we need to think about that. Again, you know, we're looking at areas which come under pressure for on-street parking because of their proximity, for example, to the city centres or proximity to hospitals or whatever. And as I said, several wards actually now partake in it. So, yeah, I think, you know, £1 is not a problem this time, and I know inflation is going up, and we are sort of trying to increase the living wage and all that, for which, again, I note, you know, we've had some help from the Welsh government, which is very good. But, you know, let's just not look at it as a way of sort of raising our revenue. Although I'm sure what you said, Myron, is, you know, the cost of administrating it and so on is of course a factor as well. But I'm hoping, you know, we don't make that a regular thing, really.
So I would suggest then, just to help Neil out here, that from the committee here, your comments would be that the 4% kind of basic increase that we attach to it is maybe considered, but you know, I would ask you as the council's chief financial officer that we are mindful of the need to keep pace with cost increases at the very least, then that then maintains the service and the fact that it's not cross-subsidized, you know, from in some other areas. But you may want to just feedback that the 4% kind of base increase is maybe reconsidered. I think that's how I would interpret your comments there, Councillor McDad.
Could I just clarify a point as acting chair? I mean, what happens, Marion, at these meetings, I think you understand. When all you officers have gone, at the end of the meeting, the elected members have a discussion and we formulate what we wish to process from there. So I take your point that you're asking Councillor Al-Nuami for his opinion now, but to be honest, it'll be formally given at the end of the meeting.
That's fine. I'm
quite happy with the comment of Myron anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
I'm just helping.
Yeah, you're
helping out as to how you might summarise what you
understand. I understand. I understand. Right,
Chair, if I could just add to reinforce what Myron is saying there, is it is important, obviously, because this is a discretionary service. And if it doesn't keep up with inflation, then the general taxpayer is picking it up. Of course, it's not available to the general taxpayer. So there's the sustainability element of the council of that, but there's also our broader sustainability legislation, our sustainability objectives. Is if the general taxation pot is seen as subsidising people to more conveniently own cars, we do have some issues with that, and that could cause us some problems further down the line. Because obviously, we want to be, whilst we want to keep the cost reasonable and we're keeping this at cost base, what we don't want to be doing is trying to subsidise people to live slightly less sustainable lifestyle, because that money's coming from the pot that could be spent on improving active travel, could be spent on improving public transport and the like. So we've got to be careful with that argument as well.
Okay, fine. Thank you both. McDad, can I move on to Councillor Forsey, or are you okay?
No, we're going to look at the council tax one next, or?
Well, can I bring Councillor Forsey in and then we'll specifically...
Yeah, that's fine.
Councillor Forsey?
Thank you, Chair. There's a few things I want to raise. Some of them are bigger issues and some of them are more trivial issues. I'm looking at page 32 and I welcome the investment in the schools budget, and I notice what you say about inflation there, and I just wonder how much of that increase is going to be taken up by inflation, and what sort of assumptions you've made about inflation, and if, say, inflation went up to 7% or something, would that have a very bad effect on our budgets? What how do you think the inflation effect is going to affect us?
That's a good question. So I don't know if my colleague Amy Gowd-Pask is here. Yes, she is. So, but let me give you a broad answer first, though, to inflation. I mean, inflation affects everybody differently because it depends on what you spend your money on, and actually, whilst inflation might be running at X%, the actual pay award that is finally agreed for next year could be Y percent, and that is what we need to be concerned about, not the actual inflation figure in itself necessarily, but we are mindful of it in terms of our budget planning. So we have, in our planning next year, we made allowances in the draft budget of 4% for pay rises next year, mindful of the 1.75% agreed for teachers this year, and the unions for the NGC staff balancing for strike action on 1.75% as well, and then on top of that, the rising inflation that we currently have running at 4 or 5%. So we've significantly increased our inflation or our pay inflation provision next year for both teachers and NGC staff at 4%. We've significantly increased our kind of our inflation figures for our social care contracts because of the need to fund providers to pay the real living wage. That's gone up by over 8%, which is based on something like about an 11% or so increase in the staffing elements of those contracts, and 3% for all the other aspects. So we're looking at that now still to see if that 3% is actually enough, because obviously food costs, heating costs, etc., for our kind of residential places are running at a higher level than that. So that's an active area that we're investigating at the moment. Those are our big inflation ticket items. It's pay, and then it's social care contracts. Those are the absolute two biggest areas that drives our inflationary pressures. And for next year, they are large, driven by that inflation figure. But of course, doesn't matter, as I said to you, if inflation is running at 6% in April, if the pay rise is agreed with unions at 4%, that's what matters in terms of our budget work, of course. So I doubt if we'll have an agreement on that, in sort of April, given the fact that we haven't even agreed the current year's increases yet, as it were. But time will tell.
Okay, thank you very much, Marianne. Yvonne?
Yeah, it's difficult if wages don't keep up with inflation, then the cost of living pressures are going to be even greater, and life is going to be even more difficult for people, isn't it? There's mention here on page 32 about the budget for rough sleepers, and I wonder whether there is any update on that budget going forward, whether we will be continuing to fund that programme to try and get all rough sleepers housed.
Yeah, I mean, I presume that there you're referencing this £133,000 budget pressure. That is an item in the draft budget that we're also currently working through at the moment. So we've made allowances for that at a point in time was our kind of cost pressure for the increased provision in homelessness that in the last 2 years we've had to do. So we're looking at that from two angles now. One is what is an updated cost pressure in this area to keep that provision going as it is currently, but secondly, also more so positive, is that we're looking, Welsh governments will be making a new specific grant available to local governments to fund that cost. So we may be able to reduce that value, not because it's not going to be funded, it's because actually it doesn't need to be funded in the council's base budget, because there will be a specific grant that will deal with the same thing. Now we're just trying to ascertain what the position is on both those, the cost side and also the funding side. So that's an active area of conversation that we've got going on at the moment as we try to finalise the budgets. But in terms of an investment in keeping the current provision going, I think that's a taken at this point, but hopefully using that Welsh Government's specific grant. So that's where we are with that item.
Thank you. Obviously, as homelessness champion, I'll be, supporting continuing with this project that, as best that we can, really. You mentioned about 3 themes earlier for investment: school, city centre, and early interaction issues. I wonder.
Early prevention and early intervention.
Early intervention.
Sorry. Yeah. Wrong words.
The question's the same though. Can you tell me a bit more about what the early prevention work would be, please?
Well, there's some investments, again, not directly related to this committee's kind of core interest, but in the draft budget, there's already investments highlighted for our social care hubs, and you know, the work that our social care teams do with families, but also trying to join that up now with our kind of housing department and the work that they do to also prevent families and individuals getting into a crisis, and also some of the work that we fund in our schools and in our education departments to support our kind of, you know, our more challenged children in our schools. So there's again, that is a piece of work that we're still working on. Tracy's here, I know she can possibly talk more about than me, but trying to get a holistic view as to what investments could be made to, you know, across housing, education, social services, to try and kind of bring forward that early interaction with individuals and families, both from the school age, all, you know, and sort of beyond. So that's what we're trying to do. And again, that's an area of work that is still developing over and beyond what's already in the draft budget. I don't know if Tracy's got any more details, or Paul, or if what I've said is about, you know, is it at the moment.
Thanks, Marion. Thanks, Chair. It's probably a question for the social services scrutiny, but certainly it is, as Marion said, is about joining up and better aligning some of the prevention and inclusion services that we've got running across various departments at the moment in the council. So linking the youth team in with that sort of early intervention, and then also linking up the supporting people with the housing team and the homelessness team. So it's sort of multi-themed and multi-threaded, but certainly, you know, it's about that, you know, as it says on the tin, early intervention, trying to get you know, these issues addressed and work better and align things better amongst ourselves and other partners, to make sure that these issues don't become embedded over the long term.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Back to you, Yvonne.
Thank you. Yes, so that's one for tomorrow's scrutiny meeting, possibly then. So I'll be taking an interest in that tomorrow. Can I just go to page 47 and STR 10 about closing the asbestos cell, and I just wondered what the reasons were for that and what impact we expect to have on that, and where is the next nearest location now? Where will people have to go to? Is it a busy activity, or is it reduced?
Chair, shall I come in on that one?
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, so the asbestos cell is a small designated area of the current landfill site. So this was designed after the council agreed a regional contract with Trident Park, Project Word. So our waste no longer goes to our landfill site. So I think around about 2014-15, the council looked at alternative ways of generating income, and so it was decided that some of the space there could be allocated over to an asbestos cell. The reason being is that waste generates a greater income. So that was a saving put in around about 2014-15, a little bit before I came here. So obviously a landfill space has a finite amount of time that's available for, so that cell is now reaching its end of life, so it'll be full shortly, and so the income that we receive for that, you know, it's helped us over the last 7 years, but will drop off. There's no current intention to look for new landfill space across Newport. This was purely a commercial opportunity on landfill space that the council already had and had to continue filling up.
Okay.
Is that the best way to dispose of asbestos?
So currently it's pretty much the only way to safely dispose of that, so you can't burn the asbestos. Obviously you'd hope over time now we get less and less asbestos because it has been banned for a considerable amount of time. But obviously, when you take out old buildings, they still need to remove that safely, wrap it, and bury it so that it's safe. So it's a more intensive. There's greater cover and there's greater restrictions on it. So. But in terms of Newport, our capacity will end then, and so yeah, the people with asbestos will have to drive further. But we would hope that asbestos waste does drop off as well over the coming years.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Councillor Forsey.
Yeah, thank you. That's all for now. Thank you. I might come back with something a bit later if that's all right.
Okay, fine. Anyone else, committee member, wish to ask any questions or raise any points?
Chair, can I just?
Councillor Callaway, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
If I just want to get a bit of understanding, if I can, on somebody made reference earlier to we're sort of in this fantastic position of not having to make any savings, brilliant, but it's sort of due to COVID. But is that the sort of COVID premium? Did I mishear somebody say? There's grants coming from COVID and Welsh Government and
yeah, not directly linked to sort of COVID. I think if I was to make any comment on that one, I would probably say the Welsh Governments have seen the benefits and the importance of a local government sector that is able to deliver and support people locally. And I think that this year and next year, I think we're probably seeing the benefits of that. Welsh Governments have obviously had a good settlement from the Treasury, and they are able to support the sector this year. But is it absolutely linked directly to COVID? No. Actually, the settlement includes the capacity for local governments to deal with COVID-related costs and loss of income next year, because there won't be a hardship fund which has existed in the last couple of years. So we will be needing to make provision in our budget to deal with the ongoing risks of COVID and its impact on our budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Chair. And I suppose this is specific to the Llanwern ward in a way, and I'm not too sure how many of these situations we've got across the city. We have a situation in Llanwern where the Glanlyn development, big development, has a management fee, which is something like about £200 per household. I think the council tax then is a similar amount. Band A, B, whichever, but they're not getting the benefit in Glanlyn of some of the council services in terms of grass cutting and that sort of stuff that other parts of the city would see. So, and I know Welsh Government reviewed this, I think in 2002, but I never really saw a conclusion to it in terms of what we were going to do with management fees and the like. But is there not a vehicle where we can make allowance for that in the budget?
So let me give you a general answer, but maybe Paul and Tracy would like to come in as well, because I suspect that this in relation to sort of planning and those sorts of services. I mean, council tax is a property linked tax. It is a general tax in the same way as income tax is a general tax based on income. Council tax is a general tax based on properties. It isn't linked directly to the services that people receive. So in that sense, if you are not getting your bins collected, or you're not receiving any other services because there's a management company involved that does certain types of maintenance and stuff, it doesn't really link to your council tax, because it is a general tax based on property, akin to the income tax one that I've also mentioned as well. I don't know if Paul or Tracy has got any further comments.
Yeah, just to come in. So obviously, yeah, we do have concerns with some private management companies. It's currently a legitimate way for any new development to discharge its duties. When any large scale application comes into planning, they will speak with us in terms of adoption, and that's the route that we favour. So that's for the council to take on the responsibility and maintain its upkeep going forward into the future. But with that comes certain standards that they have to build to, certain inspection fees that they have to pay, an element of commuted sums that they have to put aside. So some developers prefer to pass on the charge to residents. Currently that is allowed in Wales. Welsh Government is reviewing that. So, you know, that is a legitimate option for the moment, but I do understand the concern of residents who feel perhaps that it's unfair that they are not paying into the general pool. I mean, it should probably be noted that the vast majority of the council's budget doesn't really pay for those core services, so they're very small. So the council's overall budget, what is it, 250 million, Myron, 300 million if you include capital? And so you know, so the entire ground service for the council is 800,000, so less than 0.4%. So you know, if you tried to even it out with council tax, it wouldn't work that way, because £200 would be massively more than would be covering those services. So it is a challenge. We do understand it, and we do know that it's difficult for residents. They will be told when they purchase their house, because of course it comes with an agreement for a management company. But we do offer all new developments at the point of planning the opportunity for full adoption.
Okay.
If Tracy wants to add anything.
Tracy, do you wish to add anything?
No, thanks, Chair. I think Paul summed that up perfectly. We do give them the option. They are allowed to choose a management company route in Wales. So they often choose a management company and pass those extra costs to the residents. It's as simple as that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thanks. Through the chair, how many developments in Newport then are we using the management fee system for?
Chair, I don't have those figures to hand. We can look into that, but we're not involved in that. That's a decision between the developer and the purchaser. But certainly we can undertake to find out what we know. I know there's a couple, so Redrow in particular, we know operate that system. And they've got a couple of sites in Newport, but there are others.
Okay. Councillor Keller, were you happy with that?
I just want a couple of other things, really,
Okay.
if I can, Chairs, thank you. The real living wage, I think, is going up to 10.05, I think, isn't it? The real living wage?
I think it's a little bit under that. I think it's just under £10, I think.
Got it in my head somewhere. It's 10.04, or could be 10.04 actually.
Okay, I don't have that detailed information.
Just wonder what, and you can say I haven't got any idea at all at the moment, but if we were to try and get everybody up to the real living wage, what would that cost? What would that cost pressure be?
Yeah, so I don't have that information now, as it were, but I mean, the sector where minimum wage etc. is quite prevalent is the social care sector, and this is dealing with that specifically. Is it the full answer? I suspect no, but it's a step in the right direction, isn't it? For sure. But there will be other sectors where that's the case. But I think that this deals with the biggest part of the council's contracts where maybe that is happening at the moment. But we can, if you'd like us to, and I'm not too sure that we could ever be certain of this, but we could have a little think as to what other sectors might be out there where this might be happening as well.
You're right. It tends to be the care providers.
It's the biggest area, yeah.
Catering staff, and which I've got a proper interest because I fry eggs for a living. But it's that stuff.
I think so. That's our biggest area, and I think that's
they were certainly through the pandemic. They were the ones that probably weren't sung highly enough, I think.
Yeah, and we are paying care providers more money through the hardship fund as a national Welsh scheme for them to pay their staff higher rates of pay at the moment, Councillor Kellaway. So this funding will now allow us to continue that, which is a very positive move, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Calloway. Right, I had a long list of questions, but I've reduced it to one observation now, to be honest, having been thrust into the chair. I think, you know, the finance is interesting, it's important, but on page 26, I think we need to put the overall finance into perspective. It says that we provide 800 services for over 158,000 people in 69,000 households, and Newport is still growing. I mean, that needs to be stated, and it puts the finance we're talking about in perspective, does it not?
It does, Chair. You know, I know it seems certainly this time last year it would have felt very strange to say this, but life goes on, doesn't it? And for sure, council services have had to adapt and change, and to change their kind of focus. As you know, initially we were responding to the pandemic, and you know, we've kind of gone through a journey, you know, over the last 2 years as a council in how we respond and how we then support the city in kind of looking forward beyond this pandemic, both as an individual level and also as a kind of, you know, a city level as well. And I think that paragraph there was absolutely meant to do what it's done there, Councillor Richards, which is to say we are trying to now move away from being, you know, I mean, 100% focused on COVID back in March, April, May 2020, to now starting to look forward and to progress, you know, day-to-day business and supporting, you know, and developing all of our other projects that the council was involved in before that. So yes, it is easy to lose sight, isn't it? But it absolutely is the case.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Back to the committee. Any committee member has a further question or observation, please?
Can I?
Which one, Councillor?
Yeah. On the council tax, again, you know, I find really some welcome reading in the report. For the first time, we're now looking at savings we have to make to balance the budget. In the previous years, we've used the council tax as a way, you know, of balancing the budget, because, you know, we've had to also make a lot of savings. So I wanted really to understand the rationale for the 3.7, because normally we assume 4%. Why 3.7? Why not more? Why not less? You know.
Well, obviously this is the draft increase for consultation, so the final amount will be agreed by cabinet in their February meeting. So I think that at this point it was important. We had a 3.7% increase in this current financial year that we are in, and therefore at this point the draft budget worked with a similar percentage, but actually it is there for consultation, and the feedback from the committees and certainly from the public will obviously be really important for the cabinet in terms of their final decisions there, as well as actually balancing the overall budget, because actually it is easy to think that we've had a bumper settlement and therefore there's not a problem, but actually the cost pressures against that, as I said at the beginning, is really quite substantial. You know, there are councils out there that are consulting on savings, as well as a council tax increase, as well as a big increase in Welsh Government funding. Yeah. So because actually those cost pressures needs those three elements there. At this stage, we are working on, you know, an increase in council tax and the increase that Welsh governments have signalled through the settlements, and it's working for Newport at this point. The Cabinet will obviously make the final decisions in February.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that you know, this is subject to public consultation. It's so, you know, we will be influenced by that. You mentioned this the standard spending assessment for Newport being low. Again, this is something we know from previously as well. We are spending below what we really should be doing, you know, for the sort of
The SSA, yeah.
You know, sort of family we are part of. Do we ever sort of regain that? Do we ever going to be within, if you like, our SSA rather than below all the time?
We are below our SSA spending because of our relatively low council tax, and that will always be the case. But I think that is a function of how the distribution of the Welsh Government's funding works.
Yeah.
They assume a standard rate of council tax. Therefore, if you're above it, you'll be above your SSA, and if you're below it, you'll be below SSA. Newport has the joint second lowest council tax across Wales, and because council tax in Wales is generally low, I would say one of the lowest across the UK. It also has high deprivation, you know, across Wales. So it's £11 million is the difference between the SSA and our budget. If Newport's council tax was at the average council tax level across Wales, its funding would increase by a little bit more than £11 million. And actually, for a city council that's also dealing with high deprivation levels, you know, that's quite a challenging place to sort of be, and it's a testament to our sort of to our services that are able to deliver what is a good service, but you know, for relatively small levels of funding. I say relative. You know, I'm not kind of saying that council tax is kind of easy at sort of any level. So can we catch up? Yes, we can. What would that take? It's simple: a higher level of council tax increase, but it would take a really large percentage to get up to the average, which is why I'm very you know, certainly as the council's chief finance officer, I will always advise the cabinet and the council to increase council tax, because if you fall behind, it's a very long road to catching up, because you need such a significant increase to do the catching up that it's unfeasible. It's not very practical. So therefore, you know, don't get too far behind. Certainly, you know, as budget pressures you know, continue to be a feature across all councils in kind of Wales, but especially, you know, an area like sort of Newport that does have relatively high deprivation levels. So, you know, my advice has always been, and will continue to be, to maintain you know, a steady increase in sort of council tax, understanding that that is a political decision at the end of the day, and you know, it is a burden, you know, and there are plenty of other burdens facing households next year, and you know, every year, but next year in particular. We're all aware of the various tax increases, etc., that coming in next April as well. So I get that, and it's we just need to find a balance that kind of works really. But that's why.
Thank you for explaining that. We noticed the pressure from you as an officer, to do that. It can make sense from your point of view because any increase from year to year is built up then in budget, which means you're in a better position either to invest in a new service or add to a new service, or sort of resist any, help in any pressure that comes, that sort of will reduce the service if you didn't do it. So, it's a good cushion without any doubt. And I acknowledge it is a political decision on our part, the members' part, for actually then deciding the level. But I think really, I'm not sure. People probably could welcome the fact, though, that say we are the second lowest council tax in Wales and probably one of the lowest in the UK, because perhaps that is the reason why we are growing as a community. I think, the quite a lot of interest in property in Wales, because when you compare it to Bristol, when you compare Newport to Bristol, for example, we are paying a lot less council tax than they do. We pay, again, significantly less council tax than they do in Cardiff. So out of the three cities, in Newport can be very attractive, really, for people to move into.
Yeah. Observation and a valid point. Can I just make one interjection? I mean, we keep repeating this council tax figure is a political decision. I mean, ultimately, it's full council that decides on the council tax rate, and that's 50 councillors in total. And we know the political makeup of that council, and the opposition are always entitled to put an alternative budget, as Councillor McDad has pointed out at the start. So, can I, Councillor Forsey still indicating, if you'll excuse me both, Councillor Forsey?
Well, I think this is rather a smaller issue, but I just wanted to ask about the impact of the rooms that we rent out. When I looked at the appendix, and it gave a list of community rooms that we normally rent out. There's reminds me it's a sort of longer list than I would have come up with, and obviously we haven't been able to rent these out over the all our sort of community meetings have been heavily restricted, and I suppose they're going to continue to be restricted over the sort of general future. So I just wondered whether we made a profit or whether they were sort of cost neutral because it's a community service, and what sort of impact that was having on the budget, not being able to use those facilities.
So I can give you a general answer, and Tracy can maybe supplement it. We, through the hardship fund, we're able to claim for any impacts of COVID on our income, so car parks, etc., due to less activity. Community centres would be one of those areas affected by not being able to meet up, etc. The COVID regs. So therefore, we have been claiming the difference between our budgets and our actual levels of income in this area in our hardship claims in the community and other kind of community venues. That will stop on the 1st of April, and that will be an issue for the council's budget to then absorb any shortfalls in the budget. I am assuming that those budgets have been increased by the standard 4%, and therefore the service area understands how it might make up that shortfall.
No, Myrian, they're not being increased this year.
So yeah, I'm not too sure if they were increased in the actual in the inflation models, but my colleagues who deal with the detail of that will sort of know. The proposal is for those fees and charges not to increase, which is what the appendix shows. So I would imagine that will be a slow burn. I would imagine that we will still see some shortfalls in that income next year, but that will be for the council to manage that budget shortfall itself next year. And then Tracy's got any more to add.
The government has soaked up those losses for us then, but it is to happen.
Yes, this year and last year, yes.
Forward. Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Chair, can I just, from that question?
By all means.
Yeah, just from that last question. So, I mean, car parks and all that during the sort of pandemic, during the last financial year, they must have had a significant drop in their income, haven't they? Yep. Stand to reason, because obviously people didn't come and all that. Won't we cover them by some kind of scheme of compensation?
Yeah, the hardship fund. The hardship fund, hardship fund has not only covered our increased costs in relation to dealing with COVID, but also dealt with our reduced income where that was specifically caused by the COVID restrictions. So our car park income has been one of our larger areas of income compensation from that hardship fund. As I've said, that stops on the 1st of April, and we will need to be putting in place, certainly in the final budget, a plan as to how the council's budgets can then be can have some sort of protection in them, so that we can meet those shortfalls ourselves next year. Nobody knows, how quickly these things will bounce back, and actually to where they'll bounce back to, because there may well be some permanent changes in habits, which means that some of these income areas might be affected permanently. But today we can't know that with any certainty. Maybe this time next year we'll have the experience of sort of 12 months of hopefully post-pandemic, kind of living, and we'll know how the world looks like then, as it were. But how we mitigate and deal with that risk in our own budgets next year, again, is an area of work that we're looking at the moment in readiness for the final budget.
Yeah, because I mean, I had expected you to come and say, we've maybe that question to Paul more than to yourself. We fallen short on our income for car parks, on various things really, and we don't seem to see that. So my assumption was that we've had the hardship fund covering that.
So we, before Paul comes in, we report in the monitoring reports that goes to cabinet what we are claiming from the hardship fund. We're just putting in our third quarter income loss claim today. It went in earlier today, but we do report those in the revenue budget monitor that goes to cabinet. So that's there and kind of out there. And yeah, car park is one of the most significant areas of our loss of income. Leisure is another one, and you wouldn't be surprised to sort of know that, would you? And community centre and higher venues is also an area as well. There's lots of areas. Yeah.
Thank you, Marion. Paul, did you want to come
in?
in?
Thanks, Chair. Just to back up what Marion is saying is, so our car park charges, if we're 40% down on patronage, then the hardship fund will have topped that up, so it will have looked flat in there. Of course, it's varied over the pandemic. When retail and shops were shut, when people had to work from home, obviously the car parks are hit more. But I think the key question is will we see a permanent change? A lot of this has gone back now and it's rebounded, but if people continue to work from home, and we see in the council and we see elsewhere in other businesses, perhaps some permanent changes, does that change the demand on some of our costs and some of our income generators? And it's difficult to know currently. And so as Marion says, we need to put in place a bit of a plan for how we deal with that unknown, really, because this is something that's never happened before, is it?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, folks, for that. Right, looking back to the agenda, unless there are any further questions, we come to item 5, Neil, which is the conclusion of committee reports. Does that mean I say thank you to all the officers for their input?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah, well, for a very small committee, it's been a very interesting questioning session, I would suggest. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Neil?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yep, so this is the part of the meeting where we take all the comments and recommendations that you would like us to take over the Cabinet. Lee's comments and recommendations would also be added to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee agenda as well. So comments from this committee and tomorrow's committee meeting, they'll be joined together and given towards the Management Committee meeting so they can have an overall discussion on them as well. But what comments and recommendations would the committee like to make for this, please?
Well, can I just generalise? I think I know anyway that you've made a note of all that's been asked and you've made a note of all the answers. Unless there's any member now wants to adjust or revise the point they made, can proceed on the basis of what's been said, perhaps. Mick, any comment on that? And then Yvonne? And then, sorry, I've got to, Martin Calloway after that.
Yeah. No, I think generally, you know, we must, I feel we must welcome the proposals there. We welcome specifically that we don't have this year to look at saving in order to balance the budget, and welcome the additionality in terms of the growth in the budget on the various services like schools and, you know, care workers and all that. So I think all that I am happy to welcome that. I did make a request about information. I noted with interest the point made about the you know, improving or increasing the manufacturing capability in our part of Southeast Wales. So I've asked for some information on really how we are going to do that, or, you know, a note on that. I think you referred to that, Chair, yourself. So I'd like to make a request for that so that we can be informed about really what, you know, what the Cardiff City region and also this manufacturing sort of emphasis on the manufacturing capability is. So that is the request I would make. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mick. Yvonne?
Thank you, Chair. I would also welcome the budget and the fact that we don't have to make cuts. I note the points that Myrian made about keeping pace with inflation and not falling behind. Because if you fall behind, then it's really difficult to catch up again. So I think it's important that our costs are increased in line with inflation. And I think it's yeah, I'm happy with how things are looking at the moment. So you know, obviously we're grateful to Welsh Government for the hardship fund and the funding, and I too welcome the increase in wages for care workers and domestic workers to a living wage as much as is possible, because I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. Martin, I'm very sorry I left you last, not because you're in the minority today.
No, I'm used to being last on everything, John.
Sorry, apologies.
No, don't bother me at all. Listen, I absolutely concur with pretty much everything that's already been said. I mean, what was important for me was the living wage and getting that up. Sleepers, I don't know if it's for this committee, but if we can facilitate in any way a more speedier approach to getting those rough sleepers in an appropriate accommodation and support and everything else. I think that's something that we ought to do. I still got a bee in my bonnet about the council tax and the fairness with in my ward, Glanlyn, and I wait to see what Tracy's going to say about the, how many across the city have got this management fee. I just don't see it as a fair way of doing things. But other than that, yeah, I mean, the only other thing I suppose is the actual council tax, 3.7%. I don't know if again, I suppose this is where it might get a little bit political, but do you send a message out that you're with the residents and say, I don't know. I mean, that's probably touchy stuff, I suppose. But
let democracy take its course.
I know. But there we are. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calloway. Yvonne, you put your hand up. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to come back on what Martin said about the management company for various new estates, and of course we've got the same thing on Jubilee Park. And then if you think about it, where do you sort of draw the line between various flat type developments, which are the same? If you're in a block of flats, then you'll have a sort of management company, fees that you have to pay as well. So it's similar to that, and residents are getting, particularly in the case of Jubilee Park, they are getting additional services or protection from flooding, I suppose, mainly in the case of Jubilee Park, that they wouldn't otherwise get, and it isn't applicable to all residents. So yeah, I just wanted to come back to Martin and say, we've got it in our area as well.
Can I say something? Sorry, Chair. Yeah, and Yvonne, I absolutely agree with, if I'm honest, and this isn't being detrimental to the council, I do believe they're probably getting a better service in some of the aspects of what happens on those estates that they may otherwise do, because the council are under different pressures, and I absolutely get that. I just feel there's an element of me that's thinking it's not quite, the balance isn't quite right in terms of council tax management and all the rest of it. So it's just a bee I got in my bonnet, but
in fairness, they're two different suppliers, aren't they, of a similar type of service, and then it goes from there. Which garage do I use? Which mechanic do I use? But it's something for an ongoing discussion. Yeah. Could I just make a point? It's coming home to me how important this Welsh Assembly Government Hardship Fund has been. And what it's done, not for just Newport City Council, it must have done for every council in Wales. And it's good that that is there, and it's good that we are talking today about not cutbacks and not savings, and we're able to talk about the management of our city. The other point is, Neil, are you there?
Yes,
you're there.
Chair, I'm typing up.
Right, just one point that Marion made about funding or grants or hardship money. Was it to social services, and did he mean to care homes? And he talked in terms of a wage uplift for the staff.
I think it was for the care providers.
Right. Can I just, one thing that went through my sort of mind straight away was that how is that process? Do we just give a dollop of money to the owner, if you like, of the care home, and then trust them to give that in wage increases to the staff, or do we follow it through? Is there any report back to us that money has found its place in the right pocket? Does that make sense?
Request for information on that, Chair, to come back to the committee.
Yeah. I might be being bad-minded, but it if it is to upgrade workers' salaries and ensure that they're above a living wage and so on, it's important that if we're giving that money out, we know that it's gone to the correct recipient, so to speak. Okay. Yeah. I don't want to start a war with all care homes in Newport, but It's just a question that went through my mind. Right, back to the committee. Are we all happy? Are we all achieved the object of today's meeting?
There's no further comments on any of the saving proposals at all. Everyone happy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we then move, Neil, to scrutiny advisory reports? Have you got any, or have you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Only to advise of the next meeting is being held on Monday, the 28th of February. Tracy Brooks and Matt Trebek will be attending for the Economic Growth Strategy and Economic Recovery Plan item, and also Tracy will also be there for the next item with the Ross, the Carbon Reduction Manager, to discuss the Carbon Management Plan progress monitoring. So that's going to be quite a meaty meeting, and then there's no further meetings for the rest of the cycle.
Okay.
And also in the last item is just the action plan, just to note that the information, the comments and recommendations the committee made for the 29th of November meeting was sent on to heads of service and officers.
Okay, just a point of clarification for me, Neil. The fact that I volunteered for today's chairmanship of the meeting, does that mean I'm committed to that joint meeting of the next two scrutiny groups?
Not for the 20 and not for the end of February meeting, Chair, because we'll have a new chair in place by then. But
no,
I just
next week or later this week.
That would be for the end of February, but I would need to check with Gareth and what it would mean for the management committee meeting for next Friday, because normally we have the chair of place and chair of people attend that meeting in case any of the management committee members want to ask a question on, you know, something that went down during this meeting. So
Yeah.
I need to check whether it would need to be yourself or whether a committee member from this committee would be able to attend in the chair's place.
Yeah, that's about as clear as mud, but thank you very much.
Yeah. I'll find out for you though.
I only want to know so I can put it in my diary. Sorry, anyone else has got a question? Nick Dad, Councillor
Yes,
Nick
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was pleased to note what Neil just said, because we did agree some actions, I think, after the 29th November meeting. Yes, Neil, and we didn't speak about them in the matters arising. So
Right.
you are saying that those will be fed, you know, for them then to be acted upon, yeah?
That's right, Councillor. Yeah, at the during the meeting, after the meetings held, we always send the comments and recommendations out to the heads of service and officers. So any kind of feedback, or if you're looking for any kind of information, we can get that back from the officers, and as soon as we get that back, then we would give it to the committee. But I've noted the information about the tree planting, we should get that information from Joe Gossage as soon as possible. So as soon as I get that, I'll send out the committee. Yeah,
because I was tempted to raise them, except that I thought perhaps it's just a matter of time. So thank you for clarifying that.
No problem. Thanks, Councillor.
We look forward to them. Yeah. Thank you.
I think if I could just, I don't think Neil misses a lot in his secretarial role, and so most of what we've discussed, if not all, has been noted and recorded. So, right, okay. Well, thank you all for attending, and
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank
Yeah.
you
Thank you very much. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you all. Thank you.